On a visit around Marshall County, and today we're at 328 Aspen in Calvert City, Kentucky. We're visiting Mr. and Mrs. B.N. Dossett. Everybody calls him Gim. I don't guess a lot of you know his name otherwise. Well, thanks for letting me come over, Gim.
Well, we're glad to have you, Brother Ray.
It's been a while since I've seen you often, but now, when I first started working at WPAD Paducah back in 1945, were you singing in a quartet then?
Well, off and on, yes. We started a little earlier than that.
Uh-huh.
I guess about 1930 or 31, somewhere along there.
And you were singing for
Pete Kennedy.
Kennedy Funeral Home. Yeah.
Pete Kennedy had a quartet.
Uh-huh.
And he'd take us down there each Sunday morning, and we'd sing, and he'd naturally advertise his funeral business.
Uh-huh.
Ray Mofield and Chub Moore. Chub's passed on. Solomon Williams, he's passed on. And myself, that was the quartet. We'd sing religious songs and spiritual songs. Pierce Lackey was the man that owned
Oh,
the
that's
station.
right. I worked for him for 14 years. He was a great guy to me, and I really learned just about all I know about the broadcast business. I learned it from him. Well, you know, Gim, I don't know that I ever started a program like this one. I'm usually a little more formal. I ask where you were born and so forth, and about your mom and dad's name, and get in something for the genealogist, but I couldn't resist that, so we'll back up a bit. Now, you were born in Marshall County.
Birmingham.
Oh, the greatest city in the world.
Well, it was
according to Mark Clayton.
It was the largest city in Marshall County at that time.
Uh-huh.
In population.
And I've heard many people who are older residents of Benton talk about the thrill they had in driving to Birmingham to visit the showboat.
Oh yeah, the Cotton Blossom was one of them.
Yeah.
I guess that's the reason that Birmingham was largest of the towns in the county.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in 1914,
Mm-hmm.
and of course that makes me 71 years old. I'll tell you
you-
before you start figuring.
You've now retired.
Well, yes, I retired in 79.
Mm-hmm.
But Birmingham had a tie yard. It had a large tobacco factory that my father was managing and working in. And they had flour mills, good flour mills.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the outgrowth of that is William Heath's mill out here at Brownsburg.
That
That's
moved, really.
That's
didn't
right.
it?
That's where it came from.
Uh-huh.
And there was various industries there, and they all shipped by water by
Tennessee River.
Tennessee River, that's right. And I guess all of the older towns were bigger because they were on the river. Of course, Paducah is a good example of that.
Surely.
So we lived there in Gilbertsville until 1919. And G.W. Martin Tobacco Company that my father worked with moved him to Gilbertsville. There was a factory down there, and he moved down there. And next day after Christmas, 1919.
Mm-hmm.
But he was so attached to Birmingham that in the spring and the summer and fall, every Sunday we'd go back to Birmingham.
Yeah, the old home place.
He bought a Model T Ford in 1923, and we'd go back up there in that Model T Ford. It'd take 2 hours to drive up there, the 10 miles. It was so rough. We'd go back and see Ty
Roads
Goheen
were
play baseball. That's what he went back
mud,
for.
dirt.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't in the gravel. But he'd go back there every Sunday to see Ty Goheen pitch a baseball game.
Well, now, Ty was a great pitcher, wasn't he?
Well,
Didn't he play pro a little while?
he could have. He went to, out in California to play, and then they signed him up at Louisville
Mm-hmm.
to play with the Colonels. He and Burr Pierce.
Me one time that he was with Ty on a trip to California or something like that.
Yeah, and Ty just up and came home. Ty could have played anywhere. You know, I umpired baseball in latter life professionally,
Mm-hmm.
and I watched Major League Baseball in person and on television, and I have said, and I'll continue to say, that Ty Goheen is the greatest athlete I ever saw on the mound.
Mm-hmm.
He never played with a baseball team, and he didn't lead them in hitting.
That's unusual for a pitcher.
Well, he could have batted, and usually did, around fourth or fifth.
Mm-hmm.
And he led him in fielding. He was just a natural athlete.
Yeah.
Played a whole lot like Ozzie Smith, if you know
Yeah.
how Ozzie played with the Cardinals.
Mm-hmm.
If you hit one towards him, he caught it. He throw you out, too.
Mm-hmm.
But the baseball is one thing my father loved, and he'd take us back to Birmingham every Sunday. And we'd watch him play baseball.
Yeah.
So I feel like that even though we moved to Gilbertsville, I still lived at Birmingham because we were up there all the time.
Well, Birmingham started this Marshall County craze, I suppose, if you want to call it that, toward basketball. I guess they were the first high school, were they not, in '32 that went to the state tournament representing the first region, and that is McCoy Terry playing.
Well, Heath won the state tournament in 1929.
Yeah, but I mean...
But Marshall County,
Marshall
yeah,
County.
they were the first that went up there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate enough in basketball in 1929, some of the Heath boys that I became very close friends to, and they were a nice bunch of fellows.
Did you know Willard Bagwell?
Oh, real well. Yeah, I did. I knew Key Bagwell, his brother. Now,
Yeah.
Key wasn't as good a player as Willard. I knew John D. McAlay that
Mm-hmm.
was on that team, and Calvin Fortson was a substitute. I knew those boys.
Mm-hmm.
But Birmingham had the first real good team in Marshall County.
Mm-hmm.
And they should have won it. Robert Goheen, Coy Terry, and Wilford Baker, Shody Provine, they had a good team.
Was Watkins' boy on?
I don't
Or was
believe,
that
no,
later?
that was later on.
Later on,
Yes,
yeah,
sir,
okay.
a little bit later. And they got beat by 2 or 3 points, and the eventual champion beat them.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to Robert Goheen about that now. I said, you ever replay that game? He said, all the time, all the time.
Yeah.
I refereed basketball about 17 years, and then I got in professional baseball and umpired a few years. And I love sports and still do. You know, I was talking to a boy one time about a basketball game, Brother Ray, and he was telling me how many games he'd refereed and how many games that he'd played. I said, son, I've seen more high school state basketball games than you ever played or saw.
Yeah.
I went to state tournament. That was my vacation for years, for 20 straight years. Well, I played 16 games. That's 300. That's 320 games, you see.
Yeah,
So that's a whole lot of basketball games.
that's right.
But I haven't been in years. I don't care for it anymore to go up there. I'd rather listen at it or watch it.
Now, you were born then in Birmingham. Did you live there long enough to go to grade school there?
I started the school the first year when we moved to Gilbertsville.
I see.
And
Do you remember any of your teachers?
oh yeah, Janora Culp Philbeck was my first teacher.
Oh, yes.
She sure
A
was.
gracious lady. I knew her.
And Reese Metcalf's deceased wife, Prudy Metcalf, Prudy Lawrence Metcalf. I went to school to her. One of the greatest people I ever knew was my 8th grade teacher, as Omer Stagner. Omer was a great fella and a good teacher.
Did he finally run a store at Sharp?
Yes, he did.
I remember that.
Omer
man
has
there.
passed on. He's been dead 7 or 8, 10 years. And he was our 8th grade teacher up there. We all just loved him.
Yeah.
He ran for county court clerk and got beat. But he ran against a fellow that you couldn't beat. the boy Holland,
Mm-hmm.
Brian Holland. You couldn't beat him. He served as long as he wanted to. Circuit court clerk, I believe it was, to the county court clerk.
Yes, and his widow then became
Yes,
clerk.
that's
Was it
right.
Martha Nell Holland?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes, I remember Mr. Holland. Well, were you there long enough to play any basketball? Or did...
Brother Ray, I didn't care anything about playing. I started refereeing when I was a sophomore in high school. And, of course, in those days, we didn't have but one referee. Couldn't afford to pay two.
Oh.
They paid us $1.50 a game. Sometimes they wouldn't take it that much.
Yeah.
And just had one referee, and I
And you
refereed.
thought that was pretty good money, didn't you?
Well, it was then for a kid, that's sophomore in high school.
Sure.
And I refereed when I was a junior, and I played basketball when I was a senior. I went to high school 5 years.
See, you're telling us a flavor of an era that you couldn't otherwise get.
That's right. Well,
Today's generation does not understand what you're saying.
Well, that's true. But I went to high school 5 years and graduated with 18 credits. You didn't have to have but 16.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have anything else to do, and I'd missed quite a bit of schooling the year before on account of sickness. So I just went back the 5th year, and I learned more the last year than I did all the other 4 put together.
Yeah, you applied yourself.
Well, I was 18 years old and was older. The first few years I just played, just trying to get by. Then I went to Murray after that, and Luther Goheen was editor of the magazine over there, the paper.
Yes.
And he asked me if I was going to play basketball, and I said, well, I hadn't thought anything about it. He said, you ought to play. Well, John Miller says, yeah, you can come out, but you can't make the team. He said, we got scholarship players here. There were Mutt Carroll, Lou Graham.
I wonder if he was just trying to spur you on.
No,
He was?
no,
Or he really meant it.
I really meant it, and I went ahead and played. I started every game they played, and he offered me a scholarship after that, but I didn't take it because I didn't want scholarship. Then meant you had to go to work. You had to sweep the floors. It wasn't like it is now.
Oh, I remember. You know, when I started in the fall of 40, as did Joe Fulks, another
Yeah.
Birmingham boy.
Yes, sir.
And I had a scholarship for debate, which meant that I hauled leaves and cleaned out the garbage at the dining room and so on. And later they transferred me to the library, but that first year, and Joe had a push broom in Wilson Hall.
Yeah.
That was his scholarship. And he was the greatest player that ever came out of the state of Kentucky, I suppose.
Well, I think he had more talent than anybody that I ever saw. And they had Red Metcalf over there at that time, too. He and Joe were over there together at that
Oh,
time.
yeah. I certainly remember Red Metcalf, one of my dear friends,
And-
even now. He's still living.
Well, I hear from him all the time. I guess Red is about as good a friend as I have, too. He's in California in the real estate business.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes in.
At homecoming about once
Yeah,
a year.
that's right. Hasn't changed a whole lot.
No.
But I reckon he has a good business out there. These boys I refereed when they all played. After they're younger than I am, and I refereed there. You know, I never refereed a basketball game with but one referee to help me. And that was Ed Odell, one game. But prior to that,
Doris Odell's brother.
that's right.
Yeah,
that's
I
right.
remember him, too.
We refereed one ball game together. Other than that, I called them all. I saw Marvin Moeller over here at Benton not too long ago.
Marvin's an old Brewers boy.
Yeah, and I refereed several games that he played. And he said, you know, I want to tell you that you let that George Little push me around more than anybody, and you never did call it. I said, you know what, Marvin? That's what George told me about you, too. Of course, he was just kidding, and I was, too. But I guess I did, you know. One referee, you just couldn't see it all.
Well, no.
Kids were different then. I'll tell you what I have done time and time and again. I'd call all the boys on both teams right around the center circle before the game started. I'd say, now look, boys, when you get over here in the corner, knock the ball out. A lot of times I can't see who knocks it out. I'm going to ask you. You tell me the truth and I'll get it right.
Mm-hmm.
If you say he did and the other fellow says he did, I'll say I'll have to have a jump ball. But you all help me and we'll get this thing right.
Mm-hmm.
Very few times that you would ask a kid who knocked the ball out. The boy would say, I did. Mm-hmm. Well, they helped me. They were honest. It taught them things, and they helped me out.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't do that now because the name of the game is win.
Yeah.
At all cost.
No matter what.
Back then, it was winning was second. Playing hard and playing fair was first.
Yeah.
But it's not that way now. I watch basketball on television, and you do too. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you who the home team is if I didn't know.
Yeah.
They make fewer fouls. They get more three-point plays, mm-hmm. more charging.
More shoot, more free throws.
The visiting team, it's a block. Mm-hmm. The home team, the other guy charges him.
Yeah.
So you can't win away from home. The name of the game is money.
Yeah.
You win at home and you draw a crowd. I'll win at home and I'll draw a crowd. If we don't win, we don't draw a crowd. Mm-hmm. So we don't sell any tickets.
Yeah.
And that's the name of the game. So we have put pro sports into our college and high school sports.
Yeah.
Unknowingly, it's happened.
And of course, in that regard, that's the reason coaches either win or they're fired.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And that's true in high school as well as college or pro.
That's the way it goes. There's two or three firsts in my life that very few people know about. I umpired the first baseball game that was ever played in Brooks Stadium in 1949.
Well,
I ran the first motorboat through Barkley, Kentucky Dam Canal.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran the first automobile with the tires off of it, set them on a railroad and ran it from Gilbertsville to Calvert City in 1937 during the flood.
Yeah.
Trains weren't running, you see.
Uh-huh.
And that's the only way you get out of Gilbertsville. And I took the tires off, put them in the trunk, set my car on the railroad and ran it down to Calvert City and put them back on and pumped them up. In 1937, Nash.
Yeah.
And that's three of the first. The first
Uh-huh.
automobile, the first boat through the canal, and umpired the first ball game in
But you can be proud of all
Brooks
of those
Stadium.
things. Now, you went to Murray State. Where did you come upon this young lady over here that's making this soup?
Well, I had to go a long way to find her. She was born and reared on the corner of the block, and I was reared in the middle of the same block.
In Birmingham?
In Gilbertsville.
Oh, Gilbertsville.
Gilbertsville,
Yeah.
She was a Hall, Earl Hall's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Had a brother, Ray, and a sister, Earlene.
Mm-hmm.
Earlene married C.E. Atnip.
Yes.
And my wife and I were reared in the same block.
Well,
I went all around the world
looking for a wife and found.
She grew up while I was gone, and right pretty young lady.
Yeah.
And I noticed her when I got back.
Did you serve in the armed forces?
No, sir. I was 4F in the armed forces. Mm-hmm. I worked in construction work, and I had an arm that was crushed up. Mm-hmm. And I was in 4F.
I thought maybe when you said when you came back, I thought maybe you meant that you had to go off to service.
No.
But that's...
I worked in Paducah for my father in tobacco business at the time we were married. And man, you talk about a fellow that had a good job. I was making 12.5 cents an hour, working 9 hours a day. And we married, and I rented an apartment, furnished apartment for $2 a week. Everything furnished. And at the end of the week, you think, well, you didn't have anything left. I had more of that left then than I do now.
Yeah.
And it went further. It went further.
Yeah.
You could buy a pair of shoes for $1.98. Well,
Yes, I've had many pairs of shoes for $1.98, and when I first went to Paducah and they started paying me $50 a week, and I rented a place there in Paducah from Floyd Lovelace's mother for $3 a week. This is 1945.
yes, you could buy more. Of course, Social Security came in. We started paying that in 1937. And they'd take a penny out of the dollar, and then the company would match it with a penny, so there was 2 cents out of a dollar. And I had to pay 10 cents a week there. Some weeks, it's $10.80 a week is what I was making. Some weeks I'd have to pay 11 cents a week. Never did I think it'd ever amount to anything, but I don't know what we'd do now without it. I sure don't.
It has been a godsend to people who are now retired.
That's right. It sure has. And of course, as you get older, the more you appreciate it. And the less it takes to live as you get older, you just don't run around as much. I don't suppose you eat as much either.
I guess not. And by that time, usually, if you bought your house on credit, as I did mine, you've gotten it paid for. I finally got mine paid for.
Well, this one that we're in here was moved from Gilbertsville and rebuilt. It cost us $1,400. The time we got it rebuilt, that's what it cost. Then we added on to it, cost us $3,000. So you can see we don't have a whole lot in our home. It's not the greatest in the world, but it's comfortable.
Well, you know, I bought Mr. Dave Booker's farm home that he had constructed for retirement. He was the banker at Hardin and chairman of the school board, very prominent citizen. And he built that place for $800.
Well, Joe Donald married one of those Booker girls.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I know
yes.
them.
Ruth,
that's right. I knew Blanche.
Blanche, and then David, who came to our reunion this year, incidentally, made a physician. He's in Massachusetts.
You married Bloomingburg.
Yeah, Janie Bell.
Yes, I know her people too.
Well, I found out from interviewing Mr. Hall over here in the nursing home, and Merlene and so on, that you go back far enough, they're kin to the Pecks.
Yes, they sure are. Pecks and the Heaths.
So I said, well, you don't even have to go as far as Adam to find out we're kin to one another.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. You know, unusual families, my father never bought anything on a credit. If he didn't have the money to pay for it, he didn't buy it. That was a peculiar trait. You can't live like that now. But he did.
Dad was about that way, and it nearly killed him when I bought that home.
And my father didn't believe in changing jobs. He started working with the G.W. Martin Tobacco Company when my dad was 17 years old in Sacramento, up in McLean County, near Central City.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked with that firm 76 continuous years and never had another job. And he died when he was 93, and he had a check coming. He hadn't drawn his last check.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, most of us don't live 76 years. And he worked for the same firm, 76 continuous
That
years.
is an
Never had
amazing
another
record.
job.
By the way, do you have any children?
Have 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys. Jim, my boy, works for the North Marshall Water District.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a daughter, Donna, in Frankfort. They sell computers.
Mm-hmm.
I have a son, Bill. He's the number 3 man with Texas Instrument in Dallas, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
They have 16 foreign countries that they have plants in, and Bill is over all of those too in the data processing.
An accomplishment.
He has a good job. And then Jean, my daughter, married Yates, and they run Yates Diesel out here on 68.
Oh, yes, I remember seeing that sign.
And my youngest daughter, Mary Pat, she's a registered nurse, works at Lourdes in the cardiac on the 7th floor. And they're all still living. They have children of their own. I had one brother, George. George was a country musician and a policeman in Paducah.
Mm-hmm.
And George passed away about 7 years ago with heart trouble.
Now, before we get totally out of time, and we've got about 5 more minutes yet, tell us a little bit about your career with the Park Service or whatever.
Well, I started working for the state of Kentucky in 1960. They formed the Water Safety Department, and Bert Combs was governor.
Mm-hmm.
And Scott Barber, who was the director of the Water Safety, was down here fishing. And he asked me if I would like to work in water safety, and of course I didn't know anything about it. And I finally said yes, and so from that I went to work. I was the first man hired in the Water Safety Department in 1960.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we worked until
Now, actually, those were police officers.
Yes,
Yeah.
same powers as in public safety, same
Yeah.
department.
Mm-hmm.
We worked until '68, and they elected a Republican, Louis Nunn, and Louis abolished the department in order to get rid of all of us. We were all Democrats, and so he abolished the whole department.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when Wendell Ford was elected governor again, Governor Ford asked me to go up there and set the department up again just like it was the first time, and I did. And after I got it set up, I transferred over to Parks Department, Director of Park Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
And my office was in Frankfort, and I lived up there 8 years. And then I retired and came back home. And I retired in 1979 and was 17 years with the state in the 2 departments,
Mm-hmm.
water safety and park rangers. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't home. I'd rather be in Marshall County.
Yeah, it's a little more home here in Calvert City. And
There's one other thing that maybe you ought to get on this. I don't know whether anybody's ever mentioned it or not, but there at Gilbertsville, when they built the dam, there was a railroad bridge that went across the river there. I.C. Railroad Bridge.
I remember that.
Well, they took that bridge, put it on barges, and moved it to Brewston, Tennessee. It was a drawbridge, and that drawbridge right now is at Brewston, Tennessee.
Now, that's
L&N
where the
Railroad.
old NC and St. L joined the L&N.
That's
in the
right.
old days.
That's
wasn't it?
right.
Mhm.
And they moved that bridge by barge, that drawbridge up there. I've been intending to go up and look at it, but I never have.
I'd like to see that
And-
old bridge again.
It's an old drawbridge that worked on a pier that just swing around and let the boats through. They had to have it that way, Brother Ray, because those steamboats, smokestacks on them were so high.
Yeah.
And when the water would get up, they had to have something on that bridge so they'd clear them through, so it was a drawbridge to let
Yeah.
them through. Of course, these diesels now, they don't have those smokestacks.
No.
They don't build those drawbridges anymore. But that thing, if you're ever down at Brewston, go along and see it. It's the same one that was at Gilbertsville.
Well, knowing that, I'll try to do exactly that. Occasionally, you know, there's a place there. I believe it's Henry I. Siegel Factory Outlet where you can buy suits rather inexpensively at times.
Well, I've never been to Brewston. I went to school with a boy from Brewston, but I've never been there. But I intend to go, the Lord willing, if He lets me live.
Mhm.
I've had some bad health problems in my latter years. I must say I was a cigarette smoker. Smoked for 50 years and quit in 1980, but I didn't quit quick enough. Had a cancer of the left lung, had to have the whole lung removed. And I haven't had any more problem. The Lord's been with me. I've been lucky.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to stay in pretty close, so I don't get out like I used to.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go to Brewston and look at that if
Yeah.
the Lord's willing.
Well, we got a couple of more minutes. Do you know of any unusual happening or funny stories or something that you'd like to get on before we close off the program today?
Well, this is a true story. When I went to school at Murray, my father was in tobacco business at Paducah. And he told me when I went over there, he said, now I'm going to furnish you money to go to school. I want you to get an education. You write a check for everything that you spend and put on the check what it's for. And he said, I'll make arrangements with William Gillian at the bank to cash them. He said, now don't write no great big checks. Well, I'd get broke and I'd write a check for $1, get it cashed at the bookstore,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd put down there for books. Well, of course, that happened every 2 or 3 days. And
Dad got suspicious.
well, he didn't say a whole lot about it, and I went over there a little better than 2 years, and I decided I was going to drop out and go to work for him. So I told him, I said, Dad, I'm not going to school this next semester. I want to work for you. He said, well, we'll get the company trucks and go over there and get your things and bring them home. I said, we don't need a company truck. I brought them all home. And he had those checked just like a deck of cards. And he just flipped them. He said, don't tell me, son, that you can get all these books in an automobile.
Father.
The old fella had them all there just like a deck of cards. He didn't tell me, but he could have told me just how much they told me.
Well, thank you so much. It's real fine. I'm glad you invited me over. And it's a pleasure to talk to Gim Dossett and be in the home of Mr. and Mrs. Dossett here, which is on, I believe it's 328 Aspen
That's right.
in Calvert City, Kentucky.
Excuse me for rambling so much.
This is Ray Mofield. We return you now to our studio.